Hello and welcome to TLC Talks, How Do I Help for Parents, Guardians, and Caregivers. I'm Jen Monteleone, Interim Executive Director of the TLC Foundation for Body-Focused Repetitive Behaviors. Thank you so much for watching this important conversation today. Our webinar will be led by BFRB expert Ruth Golomb, licensed clinical professional counselor. Ruth is a senior clinician, supervisor, and a co-director of the training program at the Behavior Therapy Center of Greater Washington, where she has worked since the mid-1980s. Ruth is also a member of TLC's Scientific Advisory Board. Please help me welcome the fabulous Ruth Golomb.
Thank you, Jen. It's wonderful to be here. Thanks so much for asking me.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us today. I'm going to go off camera and I'll be back to help with Q&A.
Sounds good. Okay, see you in a bit. Okay, well, welcome to TLC's presentation. I am going to share my slides with you, and we're going to talk about how to, when you're a family member, a parent, a loved one, how to help the family member who is experiencing the BFRB. And I am going to share my slides right now. Okay, so for parents, loved one, and caregivers, how to help. So let's talk first about BFRBs and what the different stages are. And first of all, the average age of onset for BFRBs is around the age of 12. However, we do find that, that BFRBs can start earlier, and there is a phenomenon known as baby trick. I've treated quite a few kids. Baby trick is defined as under the age of 5 of hair pulling. And I have treated many children who have been, you know, a year, 14 months, 24 months, 18 months old who have hair pulling. And one of the things that's interesting is we don't know exactly what that phenomenon is, whether that is a precursor to hair pulling or another body-focused repetitive behavior when someone gets older. What we do know is that baby trick does respond reasonably well, actually very, very well, I should say, to interventions. So finding someone who knows how to help with toddler hair pulling, as well as skin picking. I've treated young ones under the age of 5 with skin picking as well. Can be really helpful. One of the things that is useful to keep in mind is when you're treating a preschooler or a toddler, that the treatment is really predominantly for the parents, because if you think of potty training or learning how to eat at these young ages, the pediatrician doesn't take the young child off and talk to the young child by him or herself. They really talk to the parents about how to manage the environment so that the child is effectively potty training or effectively eating solids or trying new foods. The pediatrician will be talking to the parents. The same thing about a therapist who is treating a toddler or a preschooler for hair pulling or skin picking. It is really working with the parents that's the biggest issue. With elementary age, you can really come up with a good team of working with the parents and the child. The child can participate reasonably well in treatment as long as the words are user-friendly for children, and there's a lot of engagement for small children. And then the parent can really be a team member with the treatment. In middle school, we're looking for a little bit more independence, and the kids are less interested in having their parents totally involved in treatment. However, if your child is in treatment for BFRB and you do have a middle schooler, a lot of times you need to know what to be looking for at home in terms of what what should I be looking for? How can I support my child with this treatment? So having an opportunity to check in with a therapist for just even 5 minutes and being clued into what to look for and how to manage that can be very helpful. High school kids, the same issue, which is a lot of times they really need and want independence. So they need to be able to work on their treatment themselves, but parents can support that by knowing some just basic information, not necessarily all of the ins and outs and intricacies of the therapy or what's being said in the therapy sessions, but what can the parent look for at home and how can they support their child in their work and journey with this. I would also say the same thing with adults. You have young adults who might be living at home. The parents might want to be helpful and want to know how they can help. With a young adult, that is something that might be negotiated with that individual themselves, and it can be helpful to talk to that young adult about what can I do to help. The other part of this is to keep that line of communication open. The young adult may say nothing, don't do anything, in which case it's going to be really important that you as a family member try to support that person by doing what they're asking you to do. Do nothing for a week, for 2 weeks, and then check back and say, is there anything I can do? Can I do something else? And continue to have this line of communication open. Middle-aged, you're more than likely dealing with a spouse, a significant other, perhaps young children or adolescents. How can family members help the parent who might be going through this? And I'm going to suggest the same idea, which is to keep the lines of communication open. Let the family member, the middle-aged person, determine what level of help they wish to receive. And finally, the same thing about an older person. If an older person is engaging in a BFRB, perhaps that older person does in fact have a spouse or a significant other or family members or friends, or perhaps that person is living on their own. But again, that's where I would suggest speaking with the person, again, asking the person, what kind of help can I provide for you? And really trying to listen to what that person is asking for, even if the answer is nothing. That is important to have the individual be heard. So what are some key elements of good treatment? You really want to help your significant other, perhaps by trying to find a therapist who is knowledgeable about BFRBs. And first and foremost, the therapist should understand that a BFRB is a complex behavior, and therefore it requires a comprehensive approach. It's not a simple behavior, it's not a simple solution. We really need to understand the complexity of the behavior and to address that to have the most effective treatment. The way that we think about this behavior is we use what's called the comprehensive behavioral treatment, which incorporates multiple factors that could be affecting the hair pulling or skin picking. And those factors include sensory factors. So things like something that might look unusual, so that for the individual who, for example, might pick their skin, they might look at their cuticles and find that the cuticles look rough. So because it looks rough, they want to fix it. They might look in the mirror and find a hair that looks out of place. And because it looks out of place to them, they might want to remove it. They might want to feel smooth skin, and if they feel a bump on their skin, they might try to pick at it to achieve smoothness. Or someone who plays with their hair to find the kind of hair that is tactily appealing, and then they might remove it so that they have it to play with in their hands. Some people like to pick a scab and smell it, or pull their hair and rub it underneath their nose so that you have the olfactory sense as well. And again, sometimes people will chew or bite the hair or skin, so we have the mouth as well. And sometimes people have said, when they are either pulling a hair or picking a skin, they can hear a little pop, and that's appealing as well. So understanding what sensory factors are in place, what is supporting the behavior, what is appealing to the person, and also what may be negative about that is really important to understand. One of the things about the sensory factors that take place with BFRBs is for you, a family member, to understand that there is something that is appealing to the individual about this BFRB. So it feels good to them. And even though it may not feel good to you, it feels good to them. We all have different level of needs and sensory needs and likes and dislikes. I like things that I like chocolate, which I of course think everybody should like chocolate, but my husband prefers vanilla. So that is just a difference. And I know that seems rather overly simple, but it does illustrate the idea that for some people who pull their hair or pick their skin, there is something about that sensory experience that feels good, where it might not feel good to somebody else. We also look at the cognitive beliefs. We look at the thoughts that go in there. Sometimes people think I'm fixing my skin. I have this anomaly on my skin, and I'm fixing it by picking the bump off. I'm smoothing it out. I need to get out what's underneath the skin in order to fix it. I need to pull out my gray hairs in order for my hair to be its natural color. I need to pull this hair out so that I can play with it. I need to engage in my BFRB right now because I'm agitated, and it calms me down. I need to, I'm calm right now, so I need to engage in my BFRB because I like that. I'm trying to go to sleep, and the only way I can go to sleep is to engage in my BFRB. All of these are beliefs that facilitate the BFRB, and we need to understand those beliefs in order to address them and use them effectively in treatment. We might challenge them, we might present other information that can be used to help somebody manage their BFRB more effectively. We also look at affective cues, which are emotions, but even with emotions, people might be stressed, people might be, it's interesting because sometimes the BFRB works to help energize somebody. So when they're feeling low, they might engage in the BFRB to give themselves energy. And when they're feeling overly energized, a little stressed and anxious, they might engage in the BFRB to calm themselves down. So it can do honestly one of two things at different times of the day. So it doesn't function the same way even throughout the day. Sometimes people report that they're bored rather than anxious. We don't assume any emotional experience. We want to really ask for the person what's going on, because boredom, body boredom, being bored, not having anything to do at the time can contribute to body-focused repetitive behaviors. Also, feeling in a state of what we call sort of disequilibrium. So someone who's tired, someone who's hungry, can also engage in the BFRB. So we really need to understand the whole variety of affective or emotional experiences that the person may have prior to engaging in the BFRB to help them with that. The motor habits, these are well-practiced behaviors that happen, and turns out once the behavior gets practiced over and over again, kind of feels to the individual like their hands have a mind of their own, so that they just, without even realizing it, they start engaging in the BFRB. And there are certain places or environments that are more conducive to hair pulling and skin picking than others. And those are often lying in bed, looking in the mirror in the bathroom, or being in the bathroom, sometimes getting out of the shower, sometimes getting into the shower, watching TV, sitting at the computer, playing with the phone. All of these things can be places where people might engage in their BFRB. And for good treatment, we want to understand the constellation of factors that are contributing to the BFRB, and therefore address them all effectively when they come up. So trying just one thing at a time is often not going to be effective when there might be three things happening that are contributing to the BFRB and you're only trying one. And that's why when you might have tried even a very good technique, it might not have been effective because it wasn't enough, or it didn't address the multiple factors of the BFRB that was taking place at the time. Other things to really consider with a treatment provider is an individual who treats the person as a whole. And that is really, really important. I worked with a 13-year-old at the time who had fired her psychiatrist. And I asked her, I said, what is it that you'd like from your doctors? And she said to me, very clearly and articulately, she said, I want someone who's going to see me as me and not just my BFRB. She said, every time I spent time with that psychiatrist, the only thing he talked about was my BFRB and the medication that he thought should work, and it wasn't working. And those are the only two things that he talked about. And this particular individual, she was in a dance group. She was an excellent student. She had a lot of friends. She went to summer camp and thoroughly enjoyed that. She was a really extraordinary, well-rounded person and wanted to be viewed as such and treated as such. And in addition to all of these wonderful characteristics of this person, she also happened to pull her hair. And she wanted to talk about that and have help with that. But she needed to make sure that the person understood that she was more than her hair pulling. And I think that's a very, very important feature for a therapist. Additionally, I would also say there are some therapists who are well-meaning, who over-focus on other things. They think that there is an underlying cause that is causing their body-focused repetitive behavior, and the body-focused repetitive behavior is a symptom of something else. And if they can just get hold of that something else, the body-focused repetitive behavior will go away. And that is not correct, and that's not effective treatment. There certainly could be something else going on, and that absolutely could warrant attention and treatment as well, but you still have to focus on the body-focused repetitive behavior in addition. It's not one or the other, it's both. And that's important. When working with a BFRB individual, particularly if you are the parent of a child, you want the therapist to understand developmental issues, because there are certain things that are appropriate in development, and sometimes pushing a parent away, developing some independence is developmentally appropriate. And we as therapists need to help family members know how to navigate that, how to balance that, and help the parent as well as the child move through this stage appropriately. The other thing you want a therapist to do is to help with family dynamics, if that is an issue, so that they can be addressed as well. One of the things that can happen with a BFRB is it can take over the family, and it becomes the topic for everybody at every interaction, every meal, and that is not comfortable for anybody and can be very challenging and difficult. So a therapist who can help with family dynamics and help individuals balance those needs and help the person who is struggling with the BFRB develop some independence as well as clear communication about what they need at any given time can be enormously helpful for the whole family. And then as well to look at treating comorbid conditions. Those are conditions that coexist at the same time. So if someone also is experiencing a great deal of anxiety, depression, social anxiety, other things that might go along with the body-focused repetitive behavior, having somebody who can help with that. Also co-occurring events. A lot of times there are important events that are happening in people's lives. They could be weddings, vacations. For children, there might be proms or going away to college. Young adults, there could be job interviews, work trips, things along those lines. Those co-occurring events. How can we help you manage your feelings about that and manage your BFRB effectively while you're doing those things? So this is all what we are looking for when we're looking for a therapist who is knowledgeable about BFRBs. So as a family member, what can you do? So the first thing, it's so important, is to really, really work on being patient. Be patient. Change is a process. So that is very tough, because as a family member, whether you are a spouse, a significant other, or a parent, you love your family member and you really don't want your family member to suffer. But I want to just tell you that it's hard, and you want to give yourself as much compassion and and nurturing as you can, because you can't take suffering from other people. And the person who has the BFRB has to figure out how they're going to manage this themselves, because it is their behavior. It's not yours. So you can support them, but you can't make them stop the behavior. So what can you best do? You can be patient. You can really understand change as a process. And that's the type of information, not only to remind yourself, but to remind your family member as well. Change is a process. You can have, or your family member can have, 5 really good days and 5 challenging minutes. And those challenging minutes, they can do a fair amount of damage in challenging minutes. But it doesn't take away from the 5 good days, because one of the things we want to look at is, and this is what you can remind people of, something was working during those 5 days, and good job for you. And whatever we can identify that was working, you can do it again. You can recreate that. The other thing is, BFRBs are behaviors. They're not hair, they're not skin. If the client can get better control over their behavior, their hair will grow, their skin will heal. So one of the things that's really important is not to over-focus on hair growth or skin growth. I mean, it's wonderful when that happens. That's really great. But like I said, 5 minutes can do some damage. But since we're focusing on behavior, that was 5 minutes of behavior when there was a long period of time where there was successful behavior. So that's what we want to do. Not only your perspective. That's what you can do. Be patient, changes the process, focus on the behavior. And you want to focus on what we as human beings do is we tend to ignore when nothing's going on, and we tend to focus when something is happening. And we want to try to shift that focus, because if nothing is going on, that means the behavior essentially is being managed. What is working with managing the behavior? Is the person engaging in deep breathing, meditation? Are they using blocking strategies? Are they using sensory strategies? Are they engaging in a positive self-care, which is helping? We want to just identify what's working for that person, and that's what's helping. So that's one of the things in terms of your perspective. Be patient, recognize change as a process, and focus on that process. You want to accept your child or your spouse with the BFRB. You know, as I said before, a lot of, people with BFRBs are people, well-rounded people. They have personality characteristics. They're good friends. They're good people. They're interesting. They're funny. They're smart. They're capable. They're competent, and they have a BFRB. So you want to focus on all of these other characteristics of the person with their BFRB, so that you can, again, support that process. You don't want that person ever to think that you love them more without a BFRB. You love them, period. And if you think about it, what do you want for the person in your life? What do you want for that person in your life? And if you think about it, most people will answer that question. I just want that person to be happy. I want that person to be satisfied with life. So, I mean, I have never had a person say, I want my loved one to have hair. I want my loved one to have skin, or smooth skin, because in the scheme of things in life, what we want for our loved ones is for them to be happy and satisfied individuals, whatever that's going to look like. So let's start now with accepting and loving them as they are. And then we can basically, again, join them and support them in their journey. We want to look at the opportunity to release and not police as much as you might want to. Again, I'm going to go back to, you can't control this behavior. And that's really hard. So if you think about this, if you really think about, gosh, my loved one, my family member is engaging in this behavior in front of me, and I am trying to bite my tongue and not say anything. Think about how hard that is for you to do. Now think about how hard it is for your loved one to not engage in the behavior that they're engaging in. It's hard. Both of you are going through something that is hard. So I think the idea is to recognize and support yourself, support that individual. You know, I'm going to go back to, there is something that is satisfying about the BFRB. I want you to remember that, so that you're reminding that person that they're, oh, you're picking your skin again, you're biting your nails again, oh, take your hand down, you're pulling your hair again. That's not going to usually be very welcome information or reminder. It feels like it's nagging, and it also feels a little punishing. And I know that's not what your intention is by any stretch. You're trying to help, but it's not helping. So that's where trying to negotiate, work with your loved one around what can you do to help. And a lot of times the answer, at least at the beginning, the answer is going to be nothing. And you're going to have to really work on, how can you separate yourself from this experience? How can you effectively bite your tongue? Because and allow the family member to to navigate this a little bit, either on their own with the help of their therapist, with the help of a self-help book, but not with your interacting with them if it's not welcome. That's just really important. And going to go back to shift your focus to other aspects of the person. So if your child went to school today and they had a big exam, and they came home and they had fewer eyelashes, one of the things you want to be really conscious about is not over focusing on the eyelashes and saying, oh, you pulled your eyelashes, that's really too bad, which it is too bad, but more so, how was the test? What did you think? Did you feel like you studied enough? Was it really hard? How was your test? Because that's the event at school that was the most meaningful. And if you can really help shift the focus up to that person and what's important to that person, it will really help to help feel supported. Who did you eat lunch with? Did you talk to your friends? Were you able to navigate that difficult circumstance with your boss today? If you have a spouse who is experiencing that, how was work? How was that difficult phone call? How did those things go? That's what you want to check in with and help support the person. You want to love unconditionally. And I know you do, absolutely, but you want to make sure that the person in the family feels it too. So that's where, again, really helping yourself release and not police can be super helpful. So really focusing on other aspects of the family member can be helpful. And then lastly, and not least, is get support for yourself. Going through this as a family member is really challenging. It is challenging on a lot of different levels. One is it feels like a uniquely peerless situation. It feels like many of your friends, if not all of your friends, really don't know what it's like to be the parent or a spouse of someone who has a BFRB. So therefore, they don't really know what you're going through. They may give you well-meaning advice, which is not helpful, and therefore doesn't feel like supportive. You want to model, honestly, for your family member positive self-care. When you're stressed, what are you going to do to effectively manage your stress? If you're feeling frustrated, if you're trying to bite your tongue, what are you going to do that's going to effectively help you to do that? How are you going to support yourself through this process? If you can't find self-help books, exercise, yoga, meditation, if you can't find a combination of things that really speak to you and work with you, find a therapist that you can talk to that is just going to be talking about your experience, not for the purpose of helping your family member, but for the purpose of helping you. This affects you too. And how can you best support yourself? And that is really important. So what you want to do, again, when you are focusing on loving your family member, you want to recognize their strengths and abilities, and you want to do that on a very regular basis. Make it clear that your family members know that you see them. I know you're working really hard at school. I know you're studying really hard. I know as a first-time employee, you're working really hard at this company. I know you're working overtime. I know you've had challenging times with your boss. what can you recognize about that how well their effort, how hard they're trying, what they're really good at speaking up for themselves. They're really good at supporting their coworkers. They're really good at being a good team member. What are their strengths and abilities? Focus on that. See them as a whole and not simply as having hair or not, or scabs or not. I've already mentioned that before, but it's worth revisiting. Keep that in mind. Acknowledge your reactions, feelings, frustrations, and learn how to better cope with them. Again, learn how to better cope with them through, going to repeat it again, yoga, meditation, exercise, going out with a friend, getting a cup of coffee, or seeking therapy. Find ways to help you best support yourself. Also, go engage in, again, positive self-care. Do a face mask, take a bubble bath. Do some things that are self-soothing for you and nurturing and feel good for you. Reminding you again that a BFRB is adaptive. It's an adaptive way of helping the person who has the BFRB in some way. That is why they're engaging in this behavior. They wouldn't be doing it if it didn't give them something. And we, as a therapist, our job is to try to figure out what's being helped by the BFRB and how can we help those in other ways. For you as a family member, just knowing that this is an adaptive behavior, the person is not trying to injure themselves or do something that is damaging. They're not trying to do that. Keep that in mind. It's adaptive. They're trying to help themselves. And the other thing is, it's very challenging to have a BFRB. People who engage in BFRBs find it again a uniquely challenging circumstance, and they feel a great deal of shame and responsibility themselves. And when you're well-meaning, trying to help, feels like nagging, it also can feel shaming to the person. And I know that's not what you mean to do at all. So keep that in mind too, because by really pulling back and not over reminding, not telling people to take their hands down, that type of thing, that actually can be really healing. And in terms of the shame, and that is extremely important. So those are some very concrete ways to help. So keep those in mind. You also want to assess motivation. One of the things that happens a lot of times is, I can't tell you how many times I get contacted by a parent or a family member, and this can be of a child, an adolescent, or an adult child. And the parent says, oh, my child has a BFRB and really needs help. And then I contact the individual, and the individual doesn't really want help. So they're not ready for help for whatever reason. And so you want to make sure that you are not the one who is ready to have your child or spouse stop their behavior. You want to really try to balance that and make sure that the individual is at least interested in finding out some more information. I often talk about that. Say, well, is it okay if I just give you some information about this and you can think about it? Because if they're interested in information, that's a step forward. But in terms of treatment itself, assess who's more motivated, you or your loved one. Also, there's a difference between motivation and ready. You can be motivated but not ready. So when you're ready to change, you're ready to take the steps that are necessary to change. And of course, the first step is being willing to engage in treatment. Is your loved one ready to make that change? Sometimes you can determine that or help help your loved one determine that. Sometimes the therapist might be better at being able to assess that. There are times where your therapist might say, you know what, now is not the right time, but I'm here and available for when your loved one is ready. So be open to hearing that as well, because that might come up. One way to help with motivation and readiness, honestly, is to reduce conflict and power struggles around the BFRB. Again, that idea of taking the step back. Whose issue is it? Allow the person with the BFRB to be the person who is experiencing all of it, and they're not sort of fighting against you, because if they're pushing against you, then they're not really spending time with themselves dealing with the BFRB. All of their efforts are around pushing against whatever it is that you're suggesting. So pull back on the conflict, pull back on the power struggles. Ask yourself, what do I want for my loved one? Just like I said before, what do I want for my loved one? Probably to be happy and satisfied in life. So how can I facilitate that? And again, take those steps back. So strategies for change, I'm going to review here. We're going to let go and try not to nag. We're going to focus on positive aspects of your loved one, their successes, sports, music, riding, bikes, being funny, academics, theater, whatever their successes are. If you are using a reward system, reward the strategy use, not the lack of pulling or picking. You only want to reward the use of a strategy. What are they doing that is helping them not pull or pick? Just not feeling like it is not a strategy. I don't know is not a strategy. Wearing Band-Aids, wearing an eye mask, having a fidget in your hand, taking a shower sometimes can be, those are strategies. That's what you want to reward. Ask your family member, how can I help you? Let them drive the nature of the support. The other thing is, this is not a one and done question. You don't ask them on Monday, what can I do to help? And never ask that a question again. You always want to, what can I do to help you? And listen to that person. And then in 2 weeks, in a month, ask again, what can I do to help you? The other thing you might do is, how have I been doing in what you asked me? Even if it's to say nothing, how have I been doing with saying nothing? Have you noticed that I've really been trying? So you want to work with your loved one around that. View recovery as a process. It is a process. It is not a goal. It all is process. Because the thing is, if you are trying to have, let's say, full eyebrows for a picture on Friday, what happens on Saturday? So we don't look at the goal as, again, that one and done. We look at it as a process. What can I do every day, any day that I'm struggling? What can I do? Again, focus on your child or your loved one, not their hair and skin. Moving forward, how can you find a therapist who is trained in treating BFRBs? Consult with the TLC Foundation. Obviously, you know the TLC Foundation, you're here right now, but there is a on their website, there's a section about finding a trained therapist. You could, if you can't find somebody who is trained in BFRBs, you might consider finding a cognitive behavior therapist who is willing to learn about the treatment for BFRBs. And there is a training process through TLC where a therapist can learn how to treat BFRBs. It's a professional training institute, and which had been in person before COVID, but there's a virtual professional training institute. It's called the VPTI, and that is a training opportunity for anybody and is available virtually and can treat train a professional to treat BFRBs. You also may educate a therapist about training opportunities, as I just said, and books and articles. Again, the TLC Foundation is an excellent resource for this, but there are books and articles about treatment. I'm also just gonna say several colleagues and I just wrote a treatment manual for professionals, which will be out in June. So that is going to be hot off the presses in June and available. You might work on yourself and any issues that you may have regarding BFRB, behavior, control, shame as a parent. That's another way of moving forward. Again, get support for yourself. I didn't mention this before, but of course, parent groups, listservs are excellent options as well. And again, TLC Foundation is a good resource for that. And think about what is best for you and your family. Is now the best time? So if you really, again, wanna balance your resources as a family, is now the best time to be working on the BFRB. So one thing I'd like to share with you is that I had done a workshop years ago when I went to a TLC conference, and I worked with, in this case, it was pre-adolescents in the morning, and in the afternoon, I did a parent workshop. In the morning, I asked the kids, what is it that you want your parents to know? And I didn't put any names, ages or anything with that. I just wrote down what they said. And in the afternoon, I let the parents know, I said, this is what your kids are saying. And what's really interesting, I want to remind you, I'm going to read to you what out of the mouths of babes. This is the pre-adolescent. It was 8 to 13 at the time, or 8 to 12 at the time. These kids were so articulate. It was really very moving and interesting. But this is what the kids were saying. They said, be open to what I have to say. Consider what I say rather than saying no right away. Don't examine my bald spot. It's not my fault. Understand that I can't control it. Don't take offense. Take me to somebody who knows about BFRBs. Take time and effort to work on it. It takes time and effort to work on this behavior. It will not go away overnight. This is from a kid who says this. Don't point out that I am pulling with disappointed voices. It brings me down. Don't assume I'm always pulling or picking. Look at the progress, not just the slips. Don't blame yourself for my issues. Please talk to me even if I pull. It feels terrible when you won't talk to me. Stop punishing me for pulling. Be positive. Don't quiz me, and what that person meant, don't quiz me about my hair or skin at the end of the day. Let me tell people about what is going on with me, not you. It might help me to speak up on my own. So that's what the kids were saying, which I just thought was really important to share, and it's valuable information to keep in mind. So I hope this was helpful. We're going to take questions in a moment. I'm going to stop sharing, and I think Jen is going to pop back on, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Ruth. I'm going to put some questions for you in the chat so you can answer those that have come in from our community, and I'm sending you the first one right now.
Great. Okay, thank you, Jen. So the question is, I feel especially helpless when my child's behavior urges are raging. That's when I have no idea how to help other than to say stop, which I know I shouldn't do. But then what do I do? I think, this comes up a lot, and it's a really, really good question. And I think this is where what you want to try to do is when there is nothing going on right now, and the urges are not bubbling at the moment. When things are quiet and you're sitting down with your child and having a snack or talking about other things, you can ask. You can say, you know what, when you're having a particularly challenging time, what can I do to help? That's the time to come up with some things to do. One idea is to, again, have that conversation at that time. And you can tell your child, the only thing I know how to do is to say stop, and I don't think that's very helpful. So you can be honest with your child and talk to your child. Sometimes we also can work on having like secret signals. I've had parents that will pull their ear. I've had other parents that will take a little squishy ball or something and just say, "Hey, catch." So it can be a reminder without it being feeling punitive, but you must negotiate that ahead of time and not do it in the moment. You want to prepare your child so your child knows exactly what you're doing and why, and have it be, because the other thing is that helps your child feel like they're in control as well. So they're part of the solution, and that's really helpful. So that's my suggestion. I know that's really tough, but those are some things to try. Another question is, I'm worried that when my older child picks their skin in front of my younger child who doesn't have a BFRB, that might encourage my younger child to start picking too. Could that happen? And, I'm going to say it possibly could happen. It typically doesn't. It really generally, that is not an issue. BFRBs feel good to the person who's doing it, and they really don't feel good to other people. And modeling the behavior is not going to make it feel good to somebody. I'm going to take this slightly out of context and give you an example. I have an older sister, and my sister is 3 years older, and she was a big thumb sucker. So she would suck her thumb all the time. And as a little one, I always thought, oh, that's what big kids do. They suck their thumbs. I would put my thumb in my mouth. I was not interested at all. And no matter how many times I put my thumb in my mouth, I could care less. My sister loved sucking her thumb. I was never interested in sucking my thumb ever. So it is again, it's very individualized. It's something that feels good to the individual, and model it. We call this modeling, which is when you do it in front of somebody else. It generally doesn't encourage one to pull their hair or pick their skin and have that feel good. So you either have a BFRB or you don't. You have that genetic predisposition or you don't. So having an older child do it in front of a younger child shouldn't be the first thing on your radar. It is the idea of just helping that older child with their BFRB. And I always feel like everybody has something to work on. So maybe the younger child, and I've had this before, where the younger child had to learn to put their toys away better, and that was their focus. So everybody has different things to focus on. I wouldn't worry about the idea of a child picking up a BFRB. It doesn't happen. Another question that came in, my young adult does not want me to talk with them about their hair pulling, but they're losing more hair every day and clearly trying to hide bald spots before going to school. I want to let them know I love them and support them. How can I carefully open the door to the conversation? Well, I think the point is, as I've been talking throughout this whole talk before, you just want to let them know you love them and support them. And you can let them know that if they're interested or ever willing or interested in speaking with you about their BFRB or hair pulling, that you are absolutely open to having that conversation, but you will wait for them to bring it up. But you are here for them, and you love them no matter what. And that's a great way of laying some groundwork. Rather than forcing the conversation about hair pulling, focus on loving your child and being open to whatever they have to say. So another question is, we are having a hard time finding a therapist who is trained in BFRBs. The ones who are trained have long wait lists. I absolutely understand that. As I mentioned before, there's finding somebody who is interested in learning about BFRBs might be the way to go. They might be interested in going through the training process at the TLC Foundation. If they're not really able to make that commitment, they might be able to work with, we have some self-help books, which are useful for clients as well as clinicians to work on BFRBs. And as I also mentioned, we have a treatment manual coming out in June. All of those might help support a person who is less knowledgeable but interested in learning about BFRBs. So I'm going to bring up another question that comes up frequently, which is a wig. I can't tell you how many times I've had clients that have asked me about whether they should get a wig for their loved one, and is it a crutch? So the answer is more complex than that. So first of all, if someone has a great degree of loss of hair, and they are very self-conscious and feel badly about themselves and their appearance, and a wig gives them self-confidence and helps them feel better, that's a game changer. And that is absolutely useful. So that's important. That's a separate issue, though, than the other things. Sometimes a wig can be used to camouflage some damage, so that people will wear a wig and they feel a little bit more comfortable, if you will, with pulling their hair, because they can cover it better. Sometimes people will start pulling from their wig. So we need to understand what the purpose of the wig is. If the purpose of the wig is to affect the hair pulling, it may or it may not, and we wouldn't know unless we try. If the purpose of the wig is to help someone feel better about themselves and their appearance, then it's absolutely worth trying. So, but I think it's really important to understand the complexities of a wig and what it can bring. It sometimes is a mixed bag, but it can be worth trying for a variety of reasons. And the most pertinent one is to help with self-confidence and help someone feel better about themselves, and that's huge. So to keep that in mind. Here's another question that came in. There are moments when I feel a deep sense of grief for my child, for what my child is experiencing. Do you have any suggestions of how I can work through my feelings and best support my child? That's really tough. Absolutely. And I think one of the things that we do know for sure is, parents, love their children. We all love our children, and we want to do absolutely anything we can do to help. And sometimes when you have a child with BFRB, what you can do to help is limited. And that is really, really hard. So understanding that for yourself is important. Being able to, I'm going to go back to, take care of yourself, your feelings. If you need to go cry, talk to a friend, go do that. Go a positive self-care. Go take a nice bath, take a shower, go run, go to an exercise class, go and engage with yoga, but do something that addresses those feelings. Mindfulness, write down a journal of how you're feeling. All of those things can be helpful. Seek a therapist for yourself, just to talk some of these things out. It is, as I mentioned before, it's a uniquely challenging position to be a loved one of someone who has a BFRB. And it's really hard because what you can do is very limited. And as a parent, that's heartbreaking at times. And it's just important to recognize that and to take care of your feelings. The other thing, ironically, is we're also asking the person who has a BFRB to take care of their feelings, to take care of their behavior, to focus on what's going on in their life. Let's be good models ourselves and be focusing on ourselves as well, and really work on these complicated and difficult feelings. There are a lot of techniques and strategies of things to try. You have to try a number of things and see what works best for you. Okay, so I'm also going to, another question that comes up very often is this idea of, what do you do when your family member is not really trying? They're not, they've gone to therapy, they have all of these strategies, you've gotten all of these things around the house, you have all of these baskets of items, they have a list of things that they should be engaging in and trying, and they're not doing it. What do you do? That's where we're going to go back to motivation, readiness. How can we understand this, and also how can we help with this? So one of the things, again, we want to look at very clearly is to try not to be punishing or negative or punitive. But is there a way to encourage effective use of these strategies? And that's where I go back to a reward system. So looking for a fun, innovative, interesting reward system, a point system or something, token system, so that the kids get points or tokens for using each strategy. So the more strategies, the more points. The more points, the bigger reward at the end of the day, at the end of a week. So getting a reward system can really encourage use of strategies. But one of the things, again, I'm going to go back and suggest is try not to be punitive or accusing. This is behavior change. It's a process. It takes time and it's hard. So we have to just figure out what's the best way to do this. And again, looking at a reward system can be really helpful. So last question is, what if the person who is hair pulling or skin picking is not being truthful with me? So, and when I say with me, I mean as a parent, because one of the things that happens is, your child is keenly aware of you, your mood, and how this hair pulling and skin picking affects you, and they don't want to disappoint you. They're frustrated, potentially disappointed in themselves. So in order to feel better about themselves, they may downplay it. They may sort of eliminate or gloss over the behavior that they've done. So I would suggest, again, don't try to be the person that they're going to confide in about their hair pulling. Find somebody else. Again, a therapist is a great option. If a therapist is not available, they might work on doing some self-monitoring or checking in with a family friend or somebody else rather than you, because having that conversation is too hard, and that's and it feels too hard for the family member, and that's why they're having trouble with this, because it's hard to acknowledge to themselves first, and then secondly, it's super hard to acknowledge to themselves and their parent. They want to please you, and they know that this does not please you. So that's why they're having trouble. So that's the last question. We're going to wind up on that.
Thank you so very much, Ruth, for this absolutely amazing, insightful, instructive, helpful conversation.
Good. I'm so happy to do it. I really do think families and being a family member, whether, again, you're a spouse, a partner, or a parent, is such a challenging position to be in. And I think devoting some attention to this unique group, it can only be helpful. Not only does it help the parent and the family member, but it can help the person who's having a BFRB too.
Absolutely. And on behalf of TLC, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for giving of so much to this community and always being a resource and always being willing to lend your expertise. Thank you so very much.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
To the TLC staff for putting together this opportunity to gather today, thank you, amazing team, and to all of you for tuning into this important conversation. Thank you so much. We wish you a wonderful day and look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye, everyone.